June began with the readmittance to the Commonwealth of South Africa, which had withdrawn in 1961 when what was then called the British Commonwealth made racial equality a requirement for membership. There was yet another attempt to broker a ceasefire in the ongoing Yugoslav wars, which were becoming ever more complex and nasty, as every atrocity served to harden attitudes and create a whole new raft of grievances and grudges. The US had brokered a peace in March between the Bosnian and Croatian armies, which was a positive sign, but this had only enabled both to redouble their efforts against the Serb militias in their own areas. Needless to say, this latest ceasefire only lasted a few days before it was broken. And Dennis Potter, screenwriter and playwright, probably best known for his BBC drama serials Pennies from Heaven, 1978, and The Singing Detective, 1986, died of pancreatic cancer at the age of 59, just a week after his wife Margaret Morgan had succumbed to breast cancer. While Potter never won many awards, and because of working primarily in British TV was unknown in wider circles, he was held in high regard in the industry with writers such as Mark Frost, Hill Street Blues, Twin Peaks, Stephen Bochco, Hill Street Blues again, and LA Law, and Andrew Davies, House of Cards and a million costume dramas, all citing him as an influence. And so to Canada, where another set of technical regulation changes had taken effect, with teams now required to cut an opening in the airbox to allow air to flow through, rather than producing the mild supercharging effect of ramming it into the engine. Additionally, the minimum car weight was raised by 10 kilos, and fuel would now be commercial pump petrol. The FIA, remembering all the toing and froing about exactly what that meant, and not wanting to get into another round of chemistry lessons, instead decreed that it would be procuring the fuel to then be distributed, which of course annoyed both ELF, a major supplier to half the field, and AGIP, whose pump fuel was held to be not quite as good as that offered by the French company. With the regulations drawn up in a bit of a rush, Charlie Whiting hadn't specified anything about the size, shape or location of the airbox holes, and everyone had their own version of it. Most had cut a long notch in the spine of the airbox, while others had simply cut the top off the intake, preserving only the roll bar, or put holes along the bottom. Ferrari couldn't take the spine option because the size of their engine would mean it would have to be so long it would make the airbox structurally unsound, so they went for holes along the bottom, but Bernard Duda at Renault complained that thanks to the Venturi effect, this would actually increase air pressure on the engine trumpets. Charlie Whiting said he'd keep an eye on it. Just as in Spain, a temporary chicane had been added to the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve at the behest of the drivers, in this case between the hairpin and the casino turn on the back straight, which cars were taking at 150 miles an hour with no runoff area and the Olympic rowing lake just beyond the wall. Just as in Spain, it wasn't pretty, but it got the job done, and to reinforce the need to take the thing seriously, a 10-second drive-through penalty would be given to anyone who missed it. At least with a little more time to organise it, the circuit owners have been able to make the chicane with curbing, with some cones to remind drivers it was there and make sure they stayed within bounds. In the paddock, the Ligier team were undergoing a reorganisation by Flavio and Tom, who'd brought in TWR Racing's old US Vice President Tony Dow to run the team, and seconded Ian Reid, engineering director at Benetton, over to run the technical department. No official word yet, but Gerard Ducarouge could probably start packing up his office. Minardi had their new car available, the M194, designed by Aldo Costa and Gustav Brunner, with side pods raised above a channel, not unlike the 1992 double-floored Ferrari, and a new cooling system inside, while Williams were working on a B-spec version of the troublesome FW16, and Renault had upped the revs on the RS6 engine, which they hoped should give it more power without noticeably increasing fuel consumption. Benetton had added a dihedral rear wing like that on the Williams, which should make the new narrower diffuser work better, while McLaren, for their part, were reviving an idea Renault had had all the way back in 1982, and added a pipe channeling air from the exhaust into the central channel of the diffuser, while Peugeot were promising a major new engine evolution for the next race, which was their home Grand Prix. There was generally a much lighter mood around the paddock, except possibly in the Ligier pit, because there was good news from France, where Karl Wendlinger had come out of his coma with no apparent permanent effects, which meant that Andrea de Cesaris could start his 200th Grand Prix, which the team celebrated with a side-pod graphic, though Simtech remained a one-car team until Jean-Marc Gounon was available in France for the next race. As usual, the mechanics raft race provided some splashy entertainment, and as usual it was won by Jordan, their fourth win in 4 attempts. Meanwhile, on Thursday for a PR event, Damon Hill and David Coulthard raced radio-controlled Williamses, and at one point they touched and one of them rolled over. "It's like Mansell's back with us," quipped Frank. Actually, that was about to happen. Frank Williams still wasn't convinced that Damon Hill had the chops to lead the team, and he thought that David Coulthard was still too young for a full-time drive. He'd already attempted to sign up Rubens Barrichello and Heinz-Harald Frentzen, no dice, while veterans Patrese, Warwick and Boutsen had also declined. Bernie Ecclestone, with an eye on the TV ratings, was convinced that F1 needed a champion on the grid and encouraged Frank to approach Nigel Mansell. They may have parted on bad terms, but Nigel was having an awful season in IndyCar, where the Penske Ilmors were absolutely dominant. Carl Haas didn't want to lose his star driver, especially to what was starting to look like a death trap of a series, but eventually an agreement was put together that Nigel would drive Williams' number 2 in France at least, and then Nigel, Bernie and Carl Haas could sit down and talk contracts. The announcement certainly got tongues wagging in the paddock, though not all drivers were convinced. Mika Hakkinen certainly thought Mansell had had his day, and that Williams should keep faith with Damon and David. Bernie was a busy man because Molson, the main sponsors of the race, were starting to balk at the cost, $5 million in hosting rights, a fraction of what they paid for IndyCar. But F1 is a global sport, argued Bernie. Yes, but we only sell beer in the US and Canada, countered Molson's David Perkins. Well, how about we get Jacques Villeneuve into F1 then, returned Bernie. Gilles' son had been one of 3 Canadian drivers dominating Indy Lights in 1993 and had turned a lot of heads by finishing second to Al Unser Jr.'s Penske in the Indy 500 a couple of weeks before the Canadian race. He was a star in the making, with a historic name to boot, and bringing him into F1 would really put pressure on everyone in Canada to keep the Grand Prix financed. Friday afternoon's qualifying seemed to vindicate Bernard Dudo's suspicions, as Jean Alesi was over half a second ahead of everyone else and hit 306 kph through the speed traps, which went down well with the fans, Ferrari 27 of course being Gilles Villeneuve's old mount, and Jean enjoyed their adulation. But when asked how come the car was so good here, he had an alternative explanation to Dudo, saying that the circuit just suited the car, which was good under acceleration and braking. Nonetheless, in order to silence the doubters, an additional longitudinal notch was cut at the back of the airbox in time for Saturday's session. Saturday was Alesi's 30th birthday, but Michael Schumacher was determined to spoil the party, hanging it all out to take the pole by just 0.099 seconds, with Alesi not improving on Friday's time but nonetheless second for his first front row start, with Berger third, albeit 8/10 behind his teammate. The Williamses had had a very bad Friday and could only improve to 4th and 5th, with the Jordans also doing really well to line up 6th and 8th, split by Hakkinen's McLaren. The Woking team was still suffering the lack of power from the Peugeot V10, and Brundle could only manage 12th. Katayama had been a fantastic 5th on Friday, but a spin on Saturday dropped him to 9th alongside Frentzen. The footworks were suffering from an unstable chassis, the new Minardi was proving nervous on the bumps and oversteery out of corners, and Johnny Herbert continued to be disappointed with the new Lotus 109. The demoralised Ligier team could only manage 19th and 24th, while JJ Leto just couldn't get the Benetton under him, complaining of instability, and could only manage 20th, 2.8 seconds off his team leader. With the field back up to 27, there would be just one non-qualifier, and to nobody's great surprise, the odd one out for Sunday was Paul Belmondo, although it improved to within 2/10 of his teammate Gasho, who was still over a second adrift of David Brabham's sole Simtech. Despite Alesi making his first front row start, he was fuming about losing pole, but reserved most of his ire for Bernard Dudo and Williams Renault in general, who he described as sore losers, saying that Ferrari's engine had surpassed the Renault as the best one out there. Enter at this point FOM, who copyright claimed all the race footage when I made this video originally. Now that's their right as owners of the copyright. I believe that what I do falls into fair use, but as I understand it, that's notoriously difficult to prove, and I'm pretty sure they can afford better lawyers than I can. Why just this race though? Well, as I understand it, the way that the YouTube copyright system works, a company will upload a bunch of footage to something called Content ID, which is a computer system that looks at all the footage uploaded to YouTube and compares the two, and if it finds a match, it does whatever the company has told it to do. For example, in the case of the Giorgio Moroder track I use for the grid music, their current instruction is to block the video in Russia and Belarus, otherwise it's fine. That's also why the videos don't get blocked immediately. It takes a while to crawl the terabytes of video that are uploaded daily. The point being, no humans are involved really at any stage of this. Nobody is sitting down watching my videos and going, I think we'll block that one. It's all automated. It's a bit hit and miss actually. Way back when I was doing 1982, I wasn't able to include footage of the handbags between Nelson Piquet and Eliseo Salazar at Hockenheim, not because it was uploaded by FOM or RTL who covered the race, but because that clip had featured on that night's news in France, and at some point a French firm had bought all the archives of that channel, bunged it all on Content ID to see if they could get some people to pay for using it. Anyway, I've whittled on enough about this. I refer you to the Tom Scott video in the top right of the screen or in the description below for more on the whole thing. But in order to have something up for the sake of completeness, I've re-edited this video to just use still images instead, some of it freeze frames from the footage and some actual proper photographs. And now, back to your scheduled programming. Sunday's warm-up saw Brundle surprisingly top the timings ahead of the two Ferraris, but by lunchtime with the start approaching, although the sun was out, there were some nasty-looking clouds just over there. The strategists were hard at work with, assuming a dry race, Benetton, Williams and Ferrari all planning a single stop, but McLaren going for two. With JJ Leto opting to take the spare, finding it marginally more drivable than his race car, they all lined up from an incident-free parade lap, and Roland Brunschreiter signalled the start. Both Ferraris got away really well, Alesi actually beating Schumacher off the line, but he was on the dirty part of the track and couldn't make it stick, while Berger nearly got ahead of his teammate as Alesi had to bail out of his move for the lead too. Behind them, Hill had got away badly and Coulthard had gone ahead of him, with the two Jordans vying for position behind them. Hakkinen lit up his brakes and passed Irvine as the Ulsterman braked to avoid his own teammate, so as they came round to finish lap 1, Schumacher led Alesi, Berger, Coulthard, Hill, Barrichello, Hakkinen, Irvine, Morbidelli and Katayama in the top 10. Both Schumacher and Alesi were breaking away, while Berger still had Coulthard hanging onto his rear wing, with Hill right behind. Schumacher was, as was becoming customary, powering away to the tune of a second a lap quicker than everyone else, while although Berger was noticeably faster in a straight line than the Williamses behind him, he seemed to be holding them up, and before too much longer, Hill would have Barrichello and Hakkinen right behind him too. As Brundle rolled to a stop on the start-finish straight with a short circuit in his engine at the end of lap 4, Hill was impatient to get past his young teammate, who wasn't keen to move out of the way and let him past. On lap 5, Hill had to go at the hairpin, but the Scot still wasn't having any of it and stood his ground. By now, Schumacher led Alesi by about 5 seconds, with Berger and co another 3 to 4 seconds behind. Frentzen spun out at the hairpin on lap 6, and next time round Coulthard was a bit tardy getting on the power out of the hairpin, and Hill again got his nose in, before David stood on the power and again kept the place, all of which nearly let Barrichello throw too. Coulthard didn't seem to be able to catch back up to Berger though, and on lap 9 he allowed Hill through. A hand out of the cockpit, but unclear from the TV pictures if it was a thank you wave or a fist shake, and Damon immediately began to pull away, setting a new fastest lap, while Coulthard was now fending off Barrichello, suggesting there might be some minor car problem slowing him up. Behind the Coulthard-Barrichello-Hakkinen trio, Irvine was also fighting hard, trying to keep Morbidelli and the Tyrrells behind, as Hill pulled up behind Berger, while up ahead, Alesi had stabilised the gap to Schumacher at just over 5 seconds. Coulthard seemed to get going again then, and pulled back up behind Hill and Berger, the Ferrari still obviously holding up the Williamses, but just too fast on the straights to get past. Hill was throwing everything at it, but Berger was too seasoned a campaigner to be easily passed. Finally, on lap 15, Berger made a tiny error, and Hill pounced through the carousel bend, not a traditional overtaking spot. Zanardi came in the old Lotus 107 for his first fuel stop, with Tommy Hilfiger replacing Shionogi on the airbox in this round in Canada, as Hill put his foot down and started leaving Berger behind in pursuit of Alesi, setting another fastest lap. Coulthard, under pressure from Barrichello now, ran wide and was passed by the Jordan, with Hakkinen trying to follow through but ending up on the wrong side for the hairpin, all of which meant that the Irvine-Morbidelli-Katayama fight now caught up to them. It was all go, Morbidelli having a look at Irvine at the hairpin on lap 18, then getting past into the final chicane, as both Hakkinen and Katayama went straight on into the pits for their first stops. A 9.5 second stop put Mika back on the track 12th, as Comas followed them in. So, Schumacher on lap 20 of 69 was still a bit over 8 seconds ahead of Alesi, and among the first of the back markers, but Hill was the fastest man on the track as he chased Alesi down, now 3.8 seconds behind, but taking a second a lap out of the Ferrari. The other Ferrari now had its mirrors full of Jordan, until Barrichello made his stop, while, mostly off camera, Coulthard was fending off a lively Morbidelli. Berger was in next time around, a slick 7.1 second stop putting him out 8th and ahead of Barrichello. Morbidelli winkled his way past Coulthard for 4th on lap 23, but came in next time around for fuel and to have his side pods cleared of muck, and re-emerged 10th. The cameras caught a haze of blue smoke emitting from the back of De Cesaris' Sauber as Schumacher hove into view in the background, and the Italian came slowly in, suffering a lack of oil pressure, his driving done for the day. Comas was given a 10-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane and came in to do that. Almost like turning out a light, the sun suddenly disappeared as the clouds rolled in, and as Olivier Beretta made his stop on lap 30, teams were starting to prepare their wet tyres just in case. Alazy was in next time around for his sole stop, returning to the track third, just ahead of Coulthard, who had the other arrows of Fittipaldi right behind him now, but neither could take advantage of the Ferrari's cold tyres. Hill was in on lap 33, a stop of around 10 seconds, getting him out well ahead of Alazy. Good pit work by the Williams team and hard driving by Hill making the difference, with Coulthard coming in next time around, a longer stop getting him back out in 10th. So with everyone except Schumacher having stopped, the order behind him was Hill nearly 53 seconds back, then Alazy, Fittipaldi, Berger, Häkkinen, Barrichello, Morbidelli and Coulthard. Leto had worked his way up to 9th but lost 5 places when he made his sole stop. And then it started raining, but only on the old pit hairpin at the far end of the track as Fittipaldi made his stop and Schumacher approached Coulthard to put a lap on him. And as soon as it had started, it stopped again, and the wind got up, quickly blew the clouds away, and the sun came down again, as Häkkinen chased 4th place Berger. On lap 41, with 29 to go, Schumacher finally made his stop, a quick 10.4 seconds putting him out still comfortably in the lead, while Alazy's pursuit of Hill had been stymied by traffic, and he now had Berger and Häkkinen bearing him down on him. Hill was having his own traffic worries too, though, chasing a pack of Brabham, Martini, Beretta and Katayama. The Monegasque driver went through the temp chicane, so that was one down, but the Japanese in the Tyrrell was less than helpful until Ukyo had a coming together with Martini ahead of him, spun right across Hill's bows and wound up facing the wrong way, pulling a turn right in front of Berger and Häkkinen as he recovered. Off-screen, Irvine's gearbox decided to stop cooperating in the middle of the last turn, spinning Eddie backwards into the pit wall unharmed. While, having nearly managed to jump Berger for 4th in traffic, Häkkinen made his second stop on lap 43, and Berger was in next time around, another great Ferrari pit stop getting him back out just ahead of Häkkinen. Barrichello made his second stop next time around, which accounted for all of the top runners, so now it was Schumacher, Hill, Alazy, Morbidelli, Berger and Häkkinen in the points, Barrichello 7th and Coulthard 8th and the last man on the lead lap. Katayama spun again, and this time it was permanent, as he stalled his engine doing his U-turn, nearly taking his teammate Blundell out into the bargain. Morbidelli pulled off with another broken gearbox, breaking footwork's hearts as he'd been having a great race, and the famously car-breaking circuit was starting to take its toll, as Barrichello was now having difficulty selecting a gear. He came in to ask the team to look at it, but it was so close to the end that he was just told to go back out and do what he could with it, in the process losing 6th to Coulthard, and shortly afterwards 7th to Fittipaldi, as the Jordan's gearbox began sticking in the corners. Häkkinen was still going at Berger, the wily Austrian not conceding an inch, while behind them Leto had made his way back up to 8th, and with 12 laps to go was eyeing up Fittipaldi's 7th place. Beretta's engine blew on lap 60 with just 9 to go, depositing oil unhelpfully at the entrance to the temp chicane, causing a couple of hairy moments to other drivers before the marshals got the stripy flags out. At the end of lap 62, Häkkinen's engine just cut out, stranding the fin on the start-finish straight before steaming gently as he got out, which moved Coulthard up into 5th and promoted the scrap between Fittipaldi and Leto to one for the last point, only for Barrichello to intervene, overtake Leto and start attacking Fittipaldi. Alazy suddenly slowed, stuck in 2nd with 2 laps to go, but as the TV director watched Schumacher cruise to the win, Barrichello's gearbox started playing up again, and on the last lap, Leto got back ahead, but was unable to take 6th off Fittipaldi. In fact, again unseen, Barrichello and Blundell had a coming together at the casino hairpin on the last lap, leaving the Tyrrell stranded, as Rubens recovered to cross the line 8th. Alazy ground his Ferrari home 3rd, with Berger nearly nabbing it off him at the end, and David Coulthard took his first career points in his second race. After scrutineering, Fittipaldi's footwork was disqualified for being 2 kilos underweight, which promoted Leto to his first Benetton point. So with Schumacher and Benetton triumphant, 5 wins in 6, and the F1 paddock overall happy that for the first time since April a Grand Prix weekend had gone by without any serious injuries, Ron Dennis, who had been hopeful after Brundle topping the warm-up times, was looking distinctly unhappy with the Peugeot technicians, and the rest were wondering if anyone could catch Schumacher and Benetton. France in 2 weeks' time would see the return of Nigel Mansell, keenly awaited by the British fans and press, and by Damon Hill, who was not particularly happy with David Coulthard after the early laps of the race, but with almost half the season gone already, it was going to take something special to breathe life back into the championship.